Hello, traders. I hope everybody's doing well. Let me know if you can hear me. My mic is a little bit further. All right. Hopefully you can hear me. Just said my mic was unplugged then, so I'm hoping everything is okay. Let me know if you can. Let me know who's in today. That would be welcome. I'm going to go over the markets as usual. Obviously, it's a very interesting week, especially from what happened last week in terms of this dollar weakness. Dollar's definitely the main focus of the market in this week, as well as the pound. We've got we had some UK wage data out. We've also got GDP data out of the UK tomorrow, and the dollar's obviously had a little bit of a rebound from last week, considering what the NFP number was last week. So I'm interested to see how the dollar does play out this week in terms of, does it get a little bit of a rebound, or does it continue to go in a particular direction of the sort of downside direction that we're seeing. So we'll take a look at that. Also, a little bit later in the stream as well, I'll go over the currency heat map, some of the markets that I'm taking a look at, and we can go mark out a few zones. Nothing really happening right now. I did like the idea of a potential yen move. I like the idea of being a buyer of yen at the moment. So I am keeping an eye across the board, although I am expecting some sort of pullback to the yen as well. So we'll discuss that. Afternoon, Vincent. I'm doing really well, thank you. Hope you are too. Hope everything's well with you. Hope trading's going well as well. I haven't seen Denise in the live streams for a while, so I hope Denise is well. If you are watching them at a later date, Denise, let me know. Leave a comment. Right, let me just shape this up then. Let's go take a look at the data first. Obviously, data is super important. We need to understand what's happened, what this means, what could it potentially mean for the future. So we had the core CPI month-on-month come in at 0.4%. Which was the same as previous expectations, were that it was to come in a little bit lower at 0.3%. CPI month on month did rise to 0.4%. If we just have a little look at the graph here, that is now a sort of higher reading for the past 3 months. So since sort of the start of this year, we've started to see that CPI number month on month creep up slightly. That should put a little bit of a dampener on the Federal Reserve's plans to cut rates. And that's what the whole system is, or the whole game is about at the moment. Is the Federal Reserve going to cut rates? If it is, when is it going to cut rates? If we start to see CPI continue to rise, they might not cut rates. That's going to lead to sort of dollar weakness in the markets. You could see a little bit of a reflection in the stock markets as well, as that cost of doing business is increasing as well. Obviously, profits will probably increase as inflation rises. So we could see an effect there. But essentially, CPI year on year, 3.2% as well. And we've got some data coming out a little bit later. We've also got data out towards the end of the week. Like I said, tomorrow, GDP data month on month out of the UK. That's going to be quite important. I think the UK wages we're a little bit sort of down, not as high as expectations. So we saw a little bit more downside in cable as well. But yeah, we've got PPI, core retail sales towards the end of the week. Core PPI expected to fall, but retail sales expected to rise. So a bit of mixed bag of data in the US at the moment. And I think that's going to kind of be the factor of this week. So let's go on to the charts. Let's have a little look at the dollar index. Let's see where everything's kind of positioned at the moment. Dollar index for me, very, very interesting market. Obviously, we were fairly bullish on the dollar until price broke 103.50. Ever since then, we've kind of flipped the sort of narrative on that. However, we are at a level of support. So at the 102.75 handle here right now, and looking to see will that kind of give the market a little bit of a breather from this downside move that we saw recently. Obviously, traders that are short here, when price comes into support, they're going to be looking to offload some of those positions. That can obviously influence a little bit of buying pressure as well. But again, it's going to depend on how that dollar data runs for the rest of the week. The one thing that we can kind of deduce from the daily chart here is the fact that, you know, we have technically broken sort of trend. The market made sort of a inverted, not inverted, but a head and shoulders pattern with sort of a descending neckline here. We've essentially made a high at this point, a lower high, and a new low has formed. So trend traders would be considering this on the long term as now starting to potentially develop into a bearish trend. So is that dollar data going to continue to sort of reflect that? And if it does, you know, where are the interesting sort of levels? I think back towards the sort of 200 daily moving average, or even the 50 daily moving average, or anything around about the 103.50s is a good area to look at. Now, ideally, what I look for is sort of what's happening on the lower time frames as well. And at the moment, we've got that kind of consolidation area. We like consolidation. That to me means that there's a bit of volumes being built up, and we've now run through that level. So what we could expect maybe is a retest, continuation in the short term. But I like this 103.40 and above, because you can see there was obviously a sort of a stopping point here where we've got a little bit of a low volume area. We'd have quite a lot of volume up at 103.60 and above. So I think, really speaking, this 103.40 is going to be fairly important. If we can kind of stay below that, then I think maybe sellers will kind of get another sort of grip on that dollar and potentially bring dollar lower. However, if it breaches into that, we could then see 103.60. If it holds into 103.60, we could obviously see a little bit more upside in terms of volume. But at the moment, just breaking above these highs, this to me is one of those markets now, maybe one of those weeks where we could just probably hold here and just wait to see if there's any kind of opportunity to sort of see if there's any kind of increase to the upside there. I don't really like kind of jumping in after data. So it's actually been a fairly quiet week so far, especially because of the way I like to position myself in the market. I like to look at the sort of daily closes. Does that then influence my next day's kind of action? And if I go and have a little look at the currency heat map here, obviously there's a lot of turnaround. So, you know, looking at sort of what the currency strength meter is telling me, you've got cable long, Aussie long, yen longs, euro longs. On the short side, you're looking at dollar short, Swiss short, CAD short, but pound and Swiss are in those kind of reversal areas. So really speaking, I want to be looking at sort of where you can see I've put bullish here for euro, dollar, pound, dollar, Aussie, US dollar. I want to see bullish daily closes. We're not getting that so far. Dollar yen is the only one that had a bearish close, but it's at a level of support. So if you have a little look, it was a bearish close, but it was at 146.25. I actually did a video on this yesterday, thinking that we'd probably see a move higher because of that sort of supporting area. So yeah, nothing really has kind of come about for me so far. But yeah. LS, do you do analysis on the SPY? Not really. Not really. Any questions so far, guys? We do analysis, obviously, on the S&P 500. Which I guess is fairly similar. Hi, Bongo. I appreciate this strength and weakness table. You're welcome. If you want to screenshot it, then feel free to take a screenshot of that. yeah, this is what I'm kind of looking at the moment. Or alternatively, if you're a Blueberry client, you can see it in the Blueberry Markets VIP trading room. So yeah, let's just go float through some of the markets, because I think what we obviously had the end of last week was a big reaction to some dollar data. I mean, yen last week, we were looking for longs on yen pairs, and for me, CAD yen short was the big one last week. Ended up short at 110.60, and you know, this was a very nice move in the end that came all the way down into the 109 handle, which were these lows that were found in the sort of early part of the year on February 1st and the 25th of January. We've obviously come back into that area now. So I like the idea of still potentially being short this market, because if we look at it from a weekly perspective, we've had a very strong weekly bearish close. So yeah, I like the idea of potentially seeing this continue. But at the moment, for the first couple of days here, we're pulling back. So there's no need to jump on this just yet. Typically what we would see as well, if we just go to an hourly time frame, because of that, we're starting to see sort of consolidation, breakout, consolidation. I kind of expect that momentum to continue until we come into like a decent area of resistance. Now, 110 could be that resistance level, or just a little bit higher than that. Obviously, very aggressive selling coming in here. So maybe we could probably consider price if it came up towards that sort of 110 handle. We've got that hourly sort of 200 moving average there as well. So yeah, I quite like the idea of that, but I ideally would just be watching this daily chart. Like I said, if we get a sort of bullish run tomorrow, maybe Thursday comes into this level, it closes bearish, that to me then is a sign that we could potentially look for another extension to the downside. Because the way I see that is we've had a decent move down, an impulse phase, retracement phase, impulse phase. Is that in the sort of retracement phase now? That's not necessarily where I want to be doing business if I want to be short. So I'm just going to hold out on that. Bongo, can you please break down dollar yen? Yeah, so let's go over to dollar yen then. Like I said, interesting market as well, very aggressive selling coming in. I actually thought dollar yen for a while would reach back up towards the highs that formed back in November, towards 150, 180, especially because we were kind of following that sort of path of higher highs and higher lows. This area here is when we started to see that potential yen strength develop on the currency strength meter. Obviously, there's been some potential news out as well, the fact that the Bank of Japan may hike rates in March. That has also caused a sort of stir in the yen, and we saw an increase in the sort of strength of that market. So there's potential downside here as well. If the market's going to be anticipating that the Bank of Japan could hike, then is that going to be something that the market wants to benefit from until the event, essentially, almost the sort of buy the rumor, sell the news sort of option here. So looking at this kind of monthly chart, I like to just kind of go all the way out. Obviously, last month was a bullish close. That to me would also, from a technical side, would be more bullish than bearish. But obviously, the market can move and swing in all sorts of directions on this type of time frame. Going on to the weekly chart, we had that really strong bearish close. I know this looks a bit messy, guys. I can see there's a lot of support and resistance on there. Very strong bearish close down towards that level of 146.25. Starting to see a little bit of a bounce this week. So I think it's early days. I think it's early days for this week at the moment. Obviously, a lot of dollar data, like I said. But if I wanted to necessarily look at trying to capitalize on any kind of dollar yen bearishness in this market, then I would look to potentially consider kind of areas of on the sort of lower time frames, because unless price comes all the way back up towards this 149.70, there's not a lot in between that. So what I would be essentially looking for is going down to the 4-hour time frame here. Is where are those highs and lows positioned? Where are the points in the market where price tends to stall? So, for instance, this area here where the price has come into today could be an interesting area. The reason I say that is because that's the kind of area where we saw a high form. Okay, so if the market is going to be moving lower, form a high and then drive to the downside, obviously a lot of selling going on in and around this area. So are those sellers going to defend their positions at this point, or are they going to add into their positions at this point, or are they going to give up? Are they going to say, you know, this is not the position we want to be in anymore, and is price going to drive through that level? So for me right now, dollar yen, this is a very important point towards sort of 148.10 and above. I think it's important. If we can hold below it, it could be fairly bearish for the market, and we could then see a continuation down towards 146.50. However, a break above it was obviously signal something else, because we've obviously got that sort of key higher time frame resistance up towards 149.70. So for me right now, I like the idea of looking at this high, looking at the hourly. Obviously, we've had a news reaction from that area, so a news rejection doesn't really mean a lot to me at this point. So I want to see, can price get back to it? Can we get back to that high? How does the market react at that high? Do we see selling like we saw on the news, where price came into this? Obviously, buyers really kind of exhausted at that point. Sellers took control. Maybe there were some resting selling orders here at the time, which drove price back lower. Or are we going to see that kind of evaporate and see price kind of trade back to the upside here? So that's what I'm kind of working on here on dollar yen at the moment. What happens if we get back to that point here? You know, looking at the 15-minute time frame, doesn't look particularly bearish to me. I'd say it probably will try and run up towards those kind of news highs. So yeah, I'll keep an eye on dollar yen. I do like it as a potential short if that dollar does continue to weaken, if we do start to see some poorer US dollar data. What my concern is the fact that it's, again, I always talk to you about where's your risk going to be in the market? Where are you going to place your risk? Where does it make the most sense to place that risk? Doesn't really make sense right now to place any risk towards that 148 handle for me personally. I would rather see, how does the data develop? How can I go forward at that point? I did actually quite like, obviously we talked a little bit about sort of that dollar weakness, and I did actually quite like the idea of euro longs this week. Obviously last week, very strong movement into the 1.09745 area. And I was looking to see, will the market kind of continue this sort of bullish momentum in the market? And I like the idea of kind of potentially seeing this high being revisited, because the way I see the market is we've had a move down, a period of volume being built, a move down, period of volume, move down, period of volume. The market's moved out of that volume, come back into this area, went to the other side, broke it, and we're trading within this area right now. So if I was to put, let's just use a volume profile just to kind of put the point across here. We'll just go and grab the fixed range volume profile and just have a look at the whole sort of move down. Obviously the value area high up towards that 1.098 area. Big volumes where the market kind of closed below at 1.0950 on the daily chart. But essentially what I like to look at is where you see those kind of dips and then you see the volume kind of pick up again. Those kind of low volume areas to me are like little sort of shelves. You know, price is trading within this area now. Is it going to hold at this area? Is it going to trade to the other side of the value area? And if it breaks out of that, where could it go essentially? So that's what I'm kind of eyeing up right now. Is that going to happen, or is that dollar sort of move that we've had recently, is that just kind of a way to kind of flush a few people out of the market? That's something we've also got to kind of consider. But obviously daily chart, not really showing me much right now. Like I said, I like to see sort of a bullish daily close here. You know, we were long down towards 1.08 after this bullish close here. So, you know, I'm waiting for the exact same setup. Do we get a bullish close? Does it suggest that maybe buyers are stepping back into the market? How can I then try and get access to longs the next day? Now going on to the 4-hour time frame, I can see that we formed a low in here. Price broke it, failed. Again, we've come into this low here. So we're not really getting significant closes below the lows there, are we? The market is kind of stalling here at this moment in time. So there might be something formulating here for euro dollar. But again, I'm a big fan of just letting the market kind of give us a little bit more evidence before we start really kind of getting involved with it. We do have this area down through here as well. Significant volumes would be down through at this point. Market is testing those, currently rejecting those. So this could be a good area to start looking for an early position into the market. Again, let me just kind of drag on that sort of fixed range volume profile. You'll see the sort of volumes that will be developed around this area here, right? You see that just through there, that kind of spike. Let me just change this up a little bit. Let's change the row size to 10. I want it to go 100 because we're on an FX chart at the moment, not on a futures chart. That's a little bit too much. Let's go 50. Okay, so just so we can just kind of see that step out a little bit more. So you can see where the kind of high volume there kind of comes in, right? And it's right at those wicks in here. That's where we're kind of finding support at the moment. So essentially the way I'd look at that is, this is a period of sort of low volume in there. Is that going to be rejected, and is price going to break out of it, move back to the upside? So that's something I would always look to consider, is how the market comes back into an area where we've obviously consolidated in the past. Does it reject it? Does it continue to push higher? So I like the idea of being long euro dollar, but I would like to see some reaction first. Can we get a breakout maybe, or a double bottom pattern around this area? So maybe price rallies, comes back in, fails to make new lows, because that's important before kind of making any kind of moves back higher, essentially. Sorry, LS. Sorry, I've read an article by the Journal of Management and Info, and they looked into correlations and trends in the financial markets. And one of those comments made was about their analysis. They found significant positive correlation between dollar-yen. Thoughts? Yeah, so you will have a positive correlation. Well, it depends. It depends. The way you can kind of look at correlations is there are certain correlations within the market, obviously. I would, from time to time, check how those correlations are in line with each other, because sometimes the correlations can become skewed slightly, especially depending on what the data is kind of suggesting. So obviously the most kind of easiest one we could talk about is the sort of correlation between the euro US dollar and the dollar index, and that's because the dollar index is heavily weighted to the euro, so it's pretty much inverse, right? There's also correlation between sort of US bond yields and the US dollar index and things like that. Obviously, US dollar index, gold, because gold is heavily impacted. But I would just double check it. So if you've heard that and you've researched that and you want to double check it, there's a really good way you can do that, is you can come to the price here. You can actually hit this plus button where it says compare. So you can actually compare another chart to another chart. So if you wanted to have a little look at how dollar yen compares to the S&P 500 or something like that, you can just come on here and add the dollar yen chart onto the S&P 500. Now this will kind of look a little bit weird at first, but what you need to do is you just need to change yours to a line chart. I'm also going to remove some of the drawings. So, I need to actually put that onto a left-hand side chart as well. Move scales to the left, right? So this is how I would look at it. I would compare the two charts together, and then I would have a look and see how the correlation is matching with price here. So obviously at the moment, you can see that between sort of the start of this year to most recently, then there was a certain positive correlation because they're both kind of moving in the same path. But that's not always the case. Okay, you can see that the S&P 500 topped here, yet dollar yen found a low, right? So you've seen that kind of move up. Sorry, dollar yen found a top. The S&P 500 was at the bottom there, and you can see yes, the S&P 500 rallied, dollar yen moved to the downside. Now, usually there's this kind of risk on, risk off situation in the market. So usually when the market is in sort of risk on, you would naturally say that the Japanese yen would weaken. When the market is in risk off, you would naturally say that the Japanese yen would strengthen. So you also have that battle as well. Now, I would say when you do see this kind of moment here where you see dollar yen moving to the downside, the S&P 500 moving higher, I would say that we're probably more in a risk off market because the yen is strengthening against the dollar at that point. Okay, so you also have that correlation as well. But I would also, and I think this is a good point, because just because dollar yen is kind of moving lower at that point, you would naturally think that the S&P 500 would be better, kind of had that sort of move to the downside as well, but it hasn't. So I think it's always important to compare the two together at that point. Yeah, oil as well. Oil is very much affected by the risk on, risk off. Sorry, I've just seen your, do you account for correlation in your analysis, e.g. bond yields or risk on, risk off in the market? Yeah, so I've just kind of explained that. I do look at correlations. I look more at sort of how the bond yields will affect the market. I just need to change this back now, move scale back to the right. And then we need to delete that dollar yen off. But yeah, definitely something to look at. Oh, I'm clicking on the wrong one. Here we go. Definitely something to look at is the correlations in the market. Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's a big thing to look at. But just make sure that when you look at it, there is a strong correlation at that point if you're going to use correlations, because like I said, sometimes they can differ. Vincent was looking at pound CAD. Yeah, I've got pound CAD on my list here as potentially bullish as well. I like the idea of being long on pound CAD, especially if we look at it from sort of this weekly point of view. Very strong bullish weekly candlestick. My only concern is that we've come into this high here back on the 21st of Feb 2022. Obviously saw a very strong bearish reaction there. So that's the kind of my only concern with that, is prices come up into that area of resistance. Daily candlesticks are bearish at the moment, so this is where I sit on my hands and do nothing. Obviously we can still apply sort of support and resistance and whatnot. You could say, well, you know, potentially one spot 72 could be a level of resistance. Or sorry, support, because it's those lows in here. You know, you could make an argument for that. I think right now is the best idea is to sit on your hands here. Although that we've got this kind of 4-hour rejection of the 50 MA here, you could argue that price has come into these previous highs, and you know we've found a little bit of something going on there. I would sit on my hands on this one. I think what we need to see is look for your daily bullish close first, and then we'll look to see, can we get back on long ideas there. But it is on my list to go long. I like the weekly. Weekly is fairly bullish. I like the idea of being bullish this market. So I'll keep an eye on it. But pound is a little bit of a funny one at the moment. It depends how the GDP data comes out. You know, GDP data tomorrow might be fairly positive for the UK. That might change the sort of narrative here as well. Keanu, do you trade the stock market? Very rarely. If I do, I only trade it for sort of a longer term position, and I will, you know, be looking for longs basically. I don't tend to short the stock market that often, especially on an intraday basis. I prefer to be a buyer of stock markets, and the reason being is because of the trends that you get. So I tend to look for long ideas at pullbacks. You can see I've got an alert in here on the S&P 500, for instance, because I was looking for moves back towards the sort of all-time highs when we breached them, and I was looking for longs down towards this area, but my alert hasn't gone off yet, and we're starting to see another sort of rally to the upside here in the stock markets. I don't know how the Nasdaq's playing out at the moment. Nasdaq, you might get a little bit more value out of the Nasdaq at the moment. This is what I tend to look for. I tend to look for price being down towards previous swing lows. Let me just turn the session breaks off there. But yeah, Nasdaq as well. I don't really see the stock markets kind of plunging too much just yet. I think what we probably will have to look at is how the market reacts in presidential cycles now. So obviously we have that situation going on. Let me just see. Let's have a look at the presidential cycles. Because what you tend to have is a little bit of a reversal in the stock market when it's the first year. Yeah, so what we tend to see is weakest in the first year, then a recovery, peaking in the third year before falling in the fourth and final year. So we usually get those kind of presidential cycles. So although, yeah, Donald Trump's presidency was a bit of an exception to that rule. I'm trying to see if there's any images of the presidential cycles I can share with you. It's like if you use seasonality in your analysis, you'll see that there's different ones in terms of that. So if I went to equity clock, let's go to equity clock. Pretty sure they've got presidential cycles on here, but I'll have to double check. So S&P 500. Doesn't look like they've got it. No, I can't really see. I can't see it on here. There used to be a section where they'd have presidential elections, and you could see where or how the market was affected by each of those years. So I can't remember if it was equity clock or it might have been some other package. I have to try and dig that out. I know it is somewhere. I'll have to try and dig it out from somewhere. Sorry, unless I missed some. Sorry to keep asking questions, but I'm curious if you've worked at any major institution as a trader or market analyst. If so, do they use similar methods to most traders? Or is it mainly quants based on have reliable risk management? I've never been behind the desk, so I'm just curious what systems or setups they use. No, I actually haven't been behind any sort of major desks or market analysts. I've only been a Blueberry Markets analyst. It's sort of my My first role that I had, and I'm still in it from 6 years ago. I think it was six, nearly 7 years. I reckon this might be my 7th year. But no, I haven't been behind any kind of big desks. I have worked with some funds before, but I've never really worked. I've always been fairly remote. I think what you tend to get in terms of analyst wise is you usually have certain analysts covering certain sort of sectors. So you'll have sort of analysts within the area that will focus on commodities only, or focus just purely on gold. You'll have analysts that focus purely on stock markets and certain stocks. This day and age, you'll probably have someone on there that's a crypto analyst and whatnot. So yeah, I tend to find that you probably, with regards to being retail versus what those traders and analysts will do, those traders and analysts are probably very much focused on a particular asset class, whereas retail traders are open up to more of the market. And that can obviously be a strength and a weakness of a retail trader. Obviously, I think the strength is that you have a variety of markets that are available to you. Obviously, cons of that is you probably are not a master in a particular field. And I think that's why it's important to kind of gauge the market and have a good general understanding of what does what. I focus mainly on sort of majors, because everything's usually focused around the US dollar. So any dollar data to me is more of where I'm kind of pushed towards. But yeah, it can definitely become a speciality in something and just kind of trade that, I was actually discussing with my dad the other day that we could have just been soybean traders, because orange juice as well. Orange juice has done like 120%. Have a little look at the orange juice chart. Orange juice has done like since since the 2023, it's done like 120%. Now you'd only really know about that if you were really in that market, and that was mainly driven because of bad crops, because of droughts in certain areas and certain countries. Then you have that supply and demand, where if there's a drought and there's not enough being produced, then the demand for that commodity is going to rise. So there you go. But as a retail trader, you probably won't think of going to look at orange juice, essentially, if that makes sense, unless you're really kind of in that market. What other markets am I focused on this week? Let's have a quick flick back to the currency strength meter then. So Aussie CAD, yeah, quite a lot of longs on Aussie CAD, but not really looking at anything. Obviously, still fairly bearish CAD yen as well. But that's about it, really. Pound Swiss potential as well. I like the fact that the Swiss franc's a little bit weaker at the moment. There is some reports that the Swiss National Bank want to keep the Swiss franc weaker at the moment because of their exports and whatnot. And that could be something that we look at. Euro Swiss was on my list for longs as well. Look at the daily chart here, starting to get that sort of daily close. So I feel like if this was a daily close in this area here, that would kind of set me up for the next day. I'd be looking at sort of pullbacks into real key areas here. I mean, look at this. These lows aren't really tending to get lower at the moment. We've got lower highs, but the lows are very, very much stalling here. So this could be a good one to watch going into tomorrow's trading session. But I'd like to see how that kind of closes within this area here. Let's just flick up to the 4-hour time frame. Above that 50 moving average again as well. we can see that when price can get above that, we can tend to see a continuation. So potentially Euro Swiss is a bit of a move higher. There is this consolidation here again. Volumes be built up at that point. Price may want to go and seek those volumes, maybe seek the highs of those volumes, and so on. So, yeah, definitely something to consider there. Euro Swiss. Do quite like the Swiss franc being a little bit of a weaker currency at the moment. Dollar Swiss kind of coming back down towards that swing low, rejecting at the minute. So I might want to keep an eye on that one as well. What's your opinion on trading futures, Forex versus futures? I actually used to trade futures. I used to trade the Euro futures with CME data, and I don't get me wrong, I liked the movement of futures. Obviously, spot FX pretty much is. So if I was trading Euro futures, essentially I would be trading Euro US dollar in FX. The difference being, I think you get a lot more data with futures. You have the ability to look at futures data in a different way. So you've access to sort of cumulative delta, for instance. You've got access to the order book. You've got access to sort of footprint charts and things like that. No, footprint charts have actually become very popular recently. The end of the day, I feel that you still have to have a good sort of ability to be able to not jump in. You can have all the numbers in front of you, and I've been privy to this. I've had all the numbers in front of me. That's why I'm so big on talking about volumes. I use a lot of volume profile, a lot of market profile theory, or auction market theory, essentially, when trading futures. And I think you can still have all those data points in front of you, but still not be as successful as you think. I think a lot of traders or a lot of people getting into the markets think that they need all that knowledge in order to, really kind of be successful. Because of my work and whatnot that I do as an analyst, I'm not really in the futures market anymore. But I'll definitely go back and revisit it at some point. But do I think there's necessarily any benefits in terms of using that data? Yes and no. Sometimes less data can have a bit of an effect as well. I found that sometimes I was watching the volumes and the order book and watching all these numbers come in, and you think, oh my god, there's a massive order coming in here at that point, and then you kind of give yourself a bias, and that order can be quickly swallowed, especially if there's sort of a whale on the other side of it. So I think it can help. Futures data can really help, and I think it depends as well, like how much time have you got to put into it. If you've got a lot of time to put into it, and this is going to be your main income source from a day-to-day basis and intraday basis, I think futures data is a massive help. Massive help. If you're swing trading and you're using higher time frames, then I don't think it makes that much of a difference. I think if you're going to be trading sort of tick data and minute charts or whatever, then yeah, it'll make a big difference. Ratish, hello. Yeah, I'm good, thank you. Hope you're well as well. To be honest, guys, I might wrap it up here. We've been going on for about 45 minutes. I usually do about 40 minutes. Like I said, it's a bit of a slow burning week, actually. There's not really a lot going on. Obviously, there is some big data out tomorrow, GDP data month on month. And we've also got the 30-year bond auction in the US. Thursday is a big day for the market. So we'll jump on another live stream on Thursday and look at the outcome of that. I think it's a big week for the dollar. I think the market might be fairly tentative this week going into that sort of data, because we're heading into that all-important March meeting. And I think the market's going to try and weigh up what the Federal Reserve are going to do. Do I think the Fed will cut rates in March? I don't think so. I think they will hold, but they might kind of discuss when they're going to do that in the future, whether that be in the summer. So we'll have to wait and see what happens. So I'm going to leave it there, guys. Thank you for everybody that commented today. I really appreciate that. So Vincent, LS, thank you. Bongo, I appreciate you all commenting. Keanu as well, and Ratish and RHK, thank you. Appreciate all your comments and questions today. If you can leave the stream a like, I would really appreciate that. And I will come back on Thursday at 2 p.m. again, and we'll discuss how the markets have been impacted by that data. So thank you very much, guys. Have a great rest of your trading week. Stay safe, keep that risk low, and I will speak to you then. Cheers, guys.